Hi friends, and welcome back to No Book Left Behind. I'm your host Mark, and today it's the second part of my video on the First Lady of Noir, Dorothy B. Hughes. Now, if you've seen the first video in the series, you'll know that it covered the early part of her writing career, a novel she produced between 1940 and 1944, at which time she was incredibly prolific. But now we're moving to the post-war years. And let's start with the book which I think explains the disparity you sometimes see, where it's quoted that she wrote 13 novels, and in other places it's quoted that she wrote 14. And I think the reason for this is this little publication here. Now this is the Scarlet Imperial, which came out in 1946. But the big question is it really a novel or not? And the reason I pose the question is because you may have noticed this is a slightly square kind of paperback, slightly unusual shape. And that's because it's not a standard novel publication. Instead, it's what was called, back in the 1940s at least, a digest anthology. Now, what is a digest anthology, we're asking? Well, to read you the definition that I've found of it, it's a curated collection of condensed articles, stories or books, often compiled from other larger publications and presented in a compact, pocket-sized, digest-sized format. And all I can say about that is if this was pocket-sized, they had big pockets in 1940. Well, so the question is, does this really qualify as a novel? Well, let's look at the facts. The first thing is, it says it's a novel on the front. It says the new complete novel by Dorothy B. Hughes. So you've got that side of it. And it's not a very long novel, mind you. It's pretty short. And mind you, you've also got the case that it's listed as a novel in various lists that I've read of her work, and also it's been published in its own right as an ebook novel in recent years. So that all kind of like supports the fact that you call this a novel. But again, hang on for a second. This is a little bit of an unusual animal, because if you can read it from here, and I'm not going to mess up my focusing by putting it too near the camera, but this is the Mystery Book Magazine number 16. So, and it cost 25 cents back in the day, by the way. So yeah, this is called as well a magazine. And yeah, if you read the inside of it, if you go inside, you find that, and I have to be careful here because I feel I almost need like an archives white gloves to actually handle this, because it's very fragile, because it is original. It is, well, getting on for 100 years old now. Well, if you look inside, and I don't know if you'll be able to see that too well on the camera, but the text is in double columns, like in a magazine, not in a novel. Also, there are some adverts in here, but having said that, they are just adverts for other books, and they only appear on the inside of the front cover and on the back here. So those, again, not particularly relevant. But having said that, in the back, we also have another short story by a different author. That's Firehorse by Wilbur S. Peacock. And there are also 2 or 3 short articles as well, which are by other writers. So, is this a magazine then, or is it a novel? I think that's where the confusion arises. I'm not really sure which I think it is, if I'm honest with you, but I think it explains the confusion of the 13 or 14 novels question, which seems to be surround Hughes's career. So, after all that preamble, and there was enough of it, wasn't there? What's the book about? Well, let's go into that next. This is the story of a woman who's been working for 6 months as a secretary in a New York office under the name Eliza Williams. Now, she's taken the job at the behest of shady international playboy Towner Clay, who she fancies she's in love with. Now, one day, an associate of Clay's, named Gavin Keane, turns up with a package and instructions that she must protect it with her life at all costs. In the evening, when he comes to pick up the package, murder arrives on Eliza's doorstep. Now this is a reasonable enough page turner centering on a stolen jewel, the Scarlet Imperial of the title, but it's distinctly minor stuff, and it does read a little bit like a magazine story rather than a fully rounded out novel. It's okay as a quick read, and you don't have to struggle to find a copy these days. As I said, it's available now as an ebook, so you don't need to go digging through lots of auction sites and second-hand booksellers to try and find the kind of copy that I eventually came up with. Although obviously I'm glad to have it as an artifact in its own right, even if, as I say, the contents aren't her best work by any means. Now, the quality of the Scarlet Imperial is particularly remarkable when compared to Hughes's best work, because she delivered her first noir masterpiece that same year, and in fact it may have even been published first, and that one is Ride the Pink Horse. And this is about a man named Sailor who comes to a town on the US-Mexican border chasing Senator Douglas, his previous employer. Now he figures the senator owes him $500, and that money is important because the police are after Sailor for the murder of the senator's wife. Unfortunately, there's a detective hot on his trail, and the senator isn't likely to be too accommodating. Now this is a very unusual noir indeed, and I must say one of my all-time favourites. Now most noirs feature a hapless protagonist dodging punches, bullets and blondes as he tries to navigate his way through a tangled landscape of double-cross blackmail and murder, all playing out against a backdrop of existential dread and inescapable fate pulling all the strings. And Ride the Pink Horse is no different from that. But you can throw out all your notions of action, gunplay, extravagant twists and car crashes, femme fatales. None of that's here, because this is all about atmosphere, mood and character. Very little actually happens, but the threat of violence and death hangs over everything like a funeral pall. Brilliantly, when Sailor arrives in the small border town, they're in the middle of the fiesta, so there's not a hotel room to be had, and the streets are thronged with revellers. And this is such a wonderful contrast to the normal empty, rain-swept, gritty streets of an urban noir. Sailor also gets drawn into the lives of a couple of the locals, Old Man Pancho, who runs the merry-go-round, which gives the book its title, and the teenage girl Pilar. And this is just a wonderful backdrop of characters, setting and mood that really transports the reader to a different place, almost like a Neverland of noir, somewhere far removed from the usual setting that you get in these kind of stories. Actor Robert Montgomery was so impressed by it that he turned it into a 1947 movie in which he starred and also directed, and 3 years later adapted it again for his TV show Robert Montgomery Presents, although this time he only played the main character. And if you're a fan of film noir, it's simply a brilliant movie and a must-see. And if you're a fan of written noir, this is simply a must-read. Amazingly enough, though, Hughes topped it with her next novel and her second classic. And this one came out in 1947, and this is In a Lonely Place, which was of course famously adapted for the big screen in 1950 by director Nicholas Ray and starring Humphrey Bogart and Gloria Graham. In LA after the war, veteran Dixon Steele finds he is living in a city filled with strangers, but it's also a city gripped by fear. There's a serial strangler out there on the street somewhere targeting young women. Dixie's old buddy Burb is now on the police force and he's on the case. Meanwhile, Dixon has spied his lovely new neighbour Laurel Gray and attempts to start a relationship with her. Now for me this is a noir masterpiece, probably Hughes's best work, absolutely mesmerising from first page to last. Now most noir fans are probably going to be far more familiar with the movie starring Humphrey Bogart than they will be with the book. And there are significant differences between the two. And if I were to discuss those at any length, that would be a bit of a spoiler. So I'm not going to touch that. All I can say is that both book and film are very different. They have a very different emphasis. As such, both for me are classics, and it's one of those few occasions where a film has taken incredible liberties with its source material but still delivered something amazing. Now, a lot of the writing here is truly stunning, sometimes chilling, and the characters feel all too complex and real. And the backdrop really helps elevate the story too. This time we get the LA streets and the Hollywood Hills, and you just get this feel that the progress and civilization they represent is but a thin veneer over a sewer of violence and brutal death. For me, it's an absolute masterpiece and so highly recommended, I can't even tell you. Moving on from that, let's go to her next novel, which came out 2 years later in 1949. And this is The Big Barbecue. Now, this was the book that for the longest time I could not find. It was the one I needed to complete my Dorothy B. Hughes collection, but there didn't seem to be any copies out there at all. And when I finally did grab a copy, it turned out to be from 1949, the year of publication. No, it's not quite a first edition, but it is part of the second print run. And it's still in great condition, actually. But why? Why was it so difficult to find? And why did it seem to go out of print almost straight away? After all, Hughes had just delivered Ride the Pink Horse. It was turned into a movie. In a Lonely Place had just come out, and that had been optioned to be turned into another film, this one starring Humphrey Bogart, who was one of the biggest stars on the planet right then. So Hughes was riding high. Why is this book almost forgotten? Well, let's get into it. Now, the story follows the exploits of the young Ariadne Pontius, who grew up a very willful child and decided at the age of 12 that she's going to be a millionaire. Now, by the time she reaches 18, she's discarded the idea of marrying into money and is instead determined to become a film star, and heaven help anyone who gets in her way. With her parents wrapped around her little finger, she uproots the entire family to go to a vacation spot in New Mexico, where she knows a particular film producer likes to take his holidays. And when he arrives, she puts her plans into operation. Now, if you think this sounds like a twisted noir tale of unchecked pride and naked ambition leading to a spider's web of mayhem and murder, then you'd be wrong. Actually, it's a romantic comedy drama. Perhaps Hughes had simply had enough of the darkness by this point, because she definitely turns away from it here to deliver what is probably the odd one out in her bibliography. Sure, she skewers a few Hollywood types with a poison pen at some points, but it's really never mean-spirited and always takes second place to Ariadne and her silly shenanigans as she gets involved with a local artist and his younger brother, and true love begins to derail her plans. It's a definite change of pace, to put it mildly, although there were comedic elements in some of her earlier novels. I thought it was a fun enough read, if nothing very substantial. Now, there's very little information out there about this one, let alone any sales figures, but I think if you look at its publication history, it's safe to assume that it failed to make much of a splash. It's certainly not for noir fans, but yeah, I enjoyed it. Normal service was resumed again next time, with the publication in 1950 of The Candy Kid. Now, this is the tale of a Spanish-American war vet and rancher named Jose Aragon, who's offered a job of collecting a package from Juarez and bringing it back across the border by blonde femme fatale Dulcinda Ferrar, who takes him for an El Paso street punk. Irritated, but also amused, he accepts the task, only to find he's walked into a hornet's nest of murder, mayhem and sudden death. Now, if I mentioned to you that I think Hughes wrote 3 noir masterpieces, then if you know anything about her career, you'd probably assume I meant Ride the Pink Horse, In a Lonely Place, and her last novel, The Expendable Man. But no, I'm calling it here. I think it's The Candy Kid. I think this is her third masterpiece and a massively underappreciated novel. I think this one is absolutely brilliant. It's fast-paced, it's exciting, interesting action with great characters against a border town backdrop that's so vivid it reminded me of Orson Welles' Touch of Evil, and I can't think of higher praise than that. It possesses the same authenticity that permeates Ride the Pink Horse, and which probably informed by the fact that Hughes spent many years living in Santa Fe. I find it to be a spellbinding 5-star read, maybe a slight step down from the other two masterpieces I mentioned, but it's damn close. It was adapted for the popular anthology TV show Climax in the 1950s. The episode is called The Spiderweb, but it doesn't seem to have survived. At least it's not readily available for viewing. Unless anyone out there knows any different, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to watch it. Now, my copy is this hardback, which I believe from the printing information inside is actually a first edition. On the other hand, it's also spent time as a library book, as we have got some stamps inside and some labels which identify it from the 1967 inventory of the Lincoln City Public Library in Lincoln, Nebraska, which you may remember being immortalized in that incredibly cheerful Bruce Springsteen song. But this one gets a real big recommendation from me. Next up, we have the 1952 spy novel and her penultimate work, The Davidian Report. In this story, a communist named Davidian has defected from behind the Iron Curtain in Berlin, bringing a top-secret confidential report with him. Meanwhile, Steve Winters is on a flight to LA that's forced down by fog and lands at Palmdale. In order to get to the city, he agrees to share a taxi with 3 strangers, a young soldier, a Justice Department official, and an enigmatic woman. All of them seem innocent enough, but Steve's on a secret mission to retrieve the Davidian Report, and everyone is a suspect. Now, this is a pretty conventional spy drama for the most part, where Steve runs around LA desperately searching for the report, with agents of the FBI, CIA and the Communist Party all hot on his heels. It's a decent read, if nothing very special. It's fast-paced action, there's not a lot of substance to it, but there was an intriguing twist that I didn't see coming right at the end. The same year it was published, 1952, it was the subject of another TV episode, this time from Robert Montgomery Presents, an anthology show, yes, created and hosted by the star and director of the movie Ride the Pink Horse. Unfortunately, again, this episode does seem to be missing, so if anyone out there knows where I might be able to watch it, please let me know in the comments below. Now, Hughes didn't write another novel for 11 years, and that's likely because she became the primary caregiver for her elderly mother. But she returned in 1963 with one last hurrah, and that was The Expendable Man. Now, this is the story of young Dr. Hugh Densmore, who's taking his mother's Cadillac across country to Los Angeles, and on the way he picks up a young teenage hitchhiker. A few days later she's found dead in Arizona, and he becomes the police's #1 suspect for the killing. Now, this is a book that has been often named as Hughes's third classic noir, but when I read it, I'm afraid I didn't agree. It kind of passed me by a little bit. There is a great twist around page 50 or so, which really turns the whole story on its head, which I loved, but nothing else really stuck with me after I'd finished reading it. Certainly it has its groundbreaking aspects, and it's a very valuable piece of work. But I do wonder if some of the plaudits it received were really down to the timing of the publication, of the era in which it came out, because reading it today didn't really seem to have that kind of impact on me. But I may have just missed it. I may be wrong, and because of that I do intend to reread it, because digging into the career of Hughes for this video, it did strike me how many people really loved this book, and I think I need to give it a second chance. Hughes's only subsequent published work was a critical biography of the writer Earl Stanley Gardner, the creator of Perry Mason, which came out in 1978, and Hughes passed away in 1993 from complications after a stroke. So that brings to an end my short review of the life and career of Dorothy B. Hughes. Have you read any of her books? What did you think of them? Do you disagree with my opinions on them? Please let me know in the comments below. And if you're enjoying my content, why not like and subscribe to the channel? And remember, please keep searching through those dusty second-hand bookshops in those obscure parts of your town. Keep digging through those charity bins and visiting those market stalls and car boot sales, because there are treasures out there that only you can find. Be seeing you. And this one is The Big Barbecue. And that was this one, The Big Barbecue. And that was this one, The Big Barbecue. And that one is The Big Barbecue. And that one is The Big Barbecue. And that one is The Big Barbecue. And this is The Big Barbecue. And that one is The Big Barbecue. And that one is The Big Barbecue. And this is The Big Barbecue. And this is The Big Barbecue. And this was a book...